Well, thank you both, Stu and Steve, for those really insightful comments, and I think really stimulating some ideas for us to think about moving forward as a state. So you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions of Stu and Steve. We're going to have some chairs brought up here. Come on up and do that. And if you're on Zoom, we welcome you today. I know we have about 50 people on Zoom. And if you put it in the chat, I will get a message about your question. We already have one pending. So others, please get your questions ready. I'll have a couple of things. No, thank you. I'll have a couple of questions to start things out with, and then we'll move to audience questions quickly. But before I do that, let me address Steve's comment about ease of licensing. I can't let the time go by without talking about that because we do pride ourselves on being easy to work, not easy, but easier, okay, than many universities. I have worked for 4 other universities in my career, including Stanford. So I know that it is difficult in some institutions, and the philosophy may be a little bit different than what we have here at UNM. And first of all, I will say that in UNM's wisdom, many years ago now, setting up Rainforest Innovations as a separate corporation makes us a lot easier to deal with because we don't have committees. I sign all of the agreements. We have a board that governs us, but it's really our decision, and we're a small entrepreneurial group of people to work with. But and we love to do startups, we really encourage that. We generally want to start with an option agreement, and those are standard terms. $2,500 to start with for 6 months, and that can be extended for 2 years or sometimes even longer. And that makes it really easy. We can pre-negotiate the terms of the license at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, it doesn't matter. So we are extremely flexible. If you come in and say, I want to reserve an exclusive license to this technology, we can sign it that same day. We're not going to ask you for a business plan. We're not going to ask you for a whole bunch of due diligence because we know you don't have it at that early stage. That's something that we want to help you develop.
I hope other people follow your lead.
And we do have a venture lab that you can get access to our student interns for projects. In a partnership with the UNM Foundation, we can invest in the startup, and we've invested in 19 companies, $100,000 each. So we have a lot of programs to support our entrepreneurs, and look forward to working with.
And I apologize because I wasn't speaking about UNM. As I said, I hadn't worked with UNM yet.
And I apologize for the commercial, but I had to do it.
Well, yeah, not only tester, right? Does it come with, scientists in the box?
In some cases. Okay, so let me start with a question about one of the strengths in New Mexico are our arts, our cultural assets, our film and digital media, and marrying all of that with technology to create companies like Meow Wolf and Electric Playhouse and others. Like both of you, if you could touch on that a little bit, is that something that we could be capitalizing on more?
Well, I think as I mentioned a little bit I think there is real opportunity. I mean, creativity is both in the technology world and in the true tech world. That is something that can be fostered and taught and and taken advantage of. Not just directly the way I mentioned that the evolving world of content needed for the AR, VR, future of gaming world, as well as how streaming TV evolves. So that's one that if you don't take advantage of it in the state, it's criminal. The second thing is how it bleeds over into the into product, into what I'll call deep tech products. And if you've ever been part of teams that have been there are the the creatives. I on the board of Roadrunner. There is one of the creators of a company called Icon, which is a 3D building company that prints 3D houses. They have a whole staff of creatives, dreaming up what the future of housing will look like. What's the future, So you need futurists, and futurists frequently come from the creative side and definitely come from, think about all the science fiction that we've all read and grown and love, and now starting to realize some of that tech. Well, that came from creatives. It didn't come from just the techies. So I think that's the opportunity to merge them.
Yeah, I think our huge advantage is our technical base, obviously, but beyond that, we're somewhat unique in the acceptance of failure. But what I mean by that is it's perfectly okay to start a company, see it fail, and no one's going to hold that against you for the next one you start. And that's
That's critical.
Yeah.
Critical. I can't tell you how many ecosystems I've joined where failure is failure. Failure is not learning. Failure is learning. You don't want to fail, but hopefully you learn from it. What's your lessons learned?
Yeah. So I for those of you who don't know, I've spent a great deal of time in China. I've done 4 joint ventures in China. My first visit to China was 1984. And I've traveled all over the country, including in the far west, where I was the only Caucasian that was visible in the community. People would come up to me in the town square and speak English to see if I would understand, because they had learned their English from someone who was speaking English as a second language. So I've been beyond the end of the Great Wall, places like that. And what in China, if you're trying something and you fail, you're finished. There is no and will be no second opportunity. And so we have that the huge advantage over them in that cultural difference.
It's a scientific method, right? Failure is just an experiment, is moving on to the next experiment. That permeates the rest of the ecosystem here in ways that doesn't in other places. We talk about New York City as a startup world. New York City still has a huge negative on failure. I can remember my father-in-law saying to me, or to my wife, "Don't marry him, he can't keep a job." Because he, right? Because I went from startup to startup, and to his mind, it was failure. Even some of them did fail, some of them were success, but I wasn't reliable. I couldn't keep a job. That's still, if you see it, even in New York, right? Think about it. You're on Wall Street. You lost $1 billion. Probably not somebody you're thinking highly of.
We need our creatives. You both talked a little bit about recruiting. You talked about recruiting C-suite executives, and then Stu, you really touched on the grow your own, training entrepreneurs, and particularly around the state, rural communities, et cetera. Another strategy may be to attract entrepreneurs here, like the founder of Parting Stone, for example. Somebody who moves here is entrepreneurial and is going to just start a business no matter what. Is that a strategy our state could embrace?
I think we have to have some history of success before we're going to be able to attract those kind of people, so that they see others have done it, and we're on the path to do that, but we're not quite there yet. We need to continue to move in the directions we've been moving. And as Steve said, we don't need the CFO to be here. I have a couple of companies where I'm the only person here. And I, one company has one guy in Austin, one guy in North Carolina, one guy in Atlanta, and that's the startup. and so I don't think we need them here. The interesting challenge is, how do you tax companies that are virtual like that with people in multiple states. I mean, my one company, we don't know where we're taxed. We don't know where our base is. And New Mexico doesn't really even define what is a New Mexico company. At least I haven't been able to find that. In some cases, you hear people say it's where if you have more than half your employees here. But the reality is that's not written down anywhere that I can find. And so coming up with a taxation scheme that will address virtual companies and executives who are not physically here could create interesting opportunities.
That also, I think, applies to our incentive programs too, right? Whether they apply to this distributed type of company.
Right, that's really hard for that. I mean, not working for the legislature here, but it's tough to spend money that goes out of state unless you can show it come back home in a good way. I mean, I do think when you think about attracting entrepreneurs, they have to be attracted to something. Right? It's not like, oh, we can attract entrepreneurs. Why would they come here? Like think of it as a sales. If you're any of the, I was, talking about sales with someone earlier. What is it that why would they come here? Right? What is an entrepreneur looking for who wants to create a company? I mean, I think TJ probably has good ideas on that, and some of the other people who live this ecosystem on what, if you went and interviewed 100 of the people who created startups, why did they create them here rather than move? You might learn, and there are things. So I do think you can attract entrepreneurs, but it's not like an entrepreneur. It's a type of entrepreneur for this reason. And I think you need to figure out what type of entrepreneur this is the right ecosystem.
And some of those have been attracted, at least for our startups, because of the place.
Yeah.
Because they want to be
Right.
here.
So is it they come to
want to
the
be here.
place? It's a great state. Are they coming here because they're scientists who are here? Are they coming here because they're easy access to labs, and technologies to come to? Are they coming here because there's a community of incentives, right, to be here, right? I mean, I've been talking to the state of New Jersey recently, and you would think they don't suffer. They suffer possibly worse than New Mexico, other than in the pharma industry, because for some reason, nobody creates companies in New Jersey. And if you think about it, they are also trying to figure out what is it that makes them unique and double down for the right people. I don't think it's entrepreneur as a class. I think it's literally a specific subject matters, technology hubs, and your point, lifestyle reasons.
So some of you have heard about Fat Pipe. Fat Pipe is what most people would think of as a co-working space. Its flagship location is right across the street, right across Broadway here. But we also have a location in Edgewood. It's really been interesting to see what happened in Edgewood largely as a result of COVID. Because what we've seen is a pretty dramatic influx of highly educated people who got fed up with the city, mostly Chicago, San Francisco, and a few others, who have moved to the East Mountains of Albuquerque and have come to Fat Pipe there for meeting people, for high-speed internet, because they don't have that everywhere out there yet. And for lifestyle, as a result of COVID, people seem to really like the lifestyle that's available in parts of rural New Mexico, especially when the city is 20 minutes away. And so there's a huge opportunity to use that as part of the attraction to New Mexico.
Great. Let me go to some Zoom attendees' questions. One is question about scale. A lot of prior focus has been on high growth potential, and investors generally focus on high growth potential. In New Mexico, my experience is that many entrepreneurial folks aren't necessarily driven by growth. What should be the role and support in New Mexico for entrepreneurial activities that are not necessarily focused on growth prospects?
Well, that's just a difference between, entrepreneurial perspective. So lots of entrepreneurs aren't interested in growth because they're interested in lifestyle businesses. And there's an important role for lifestyle businesses that doesn't necessarily involve scaling, and that's fine. I don't see that as a negative. And as Steve said early in his presentation, you need those too. That's part of the ecosystem. It's part of the environment that makes for positive lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, those companies are important. Machine shops, right? Small fabricators, little firms that do a little R&D work or testing labs. And even those are very important to, scaling companies. Not everybody wants to build everything themselves. So the problem with that is that the funding for those, if you can't run it on a cash basis, is that it's mostly friends and loans. You're not going to attract, capital that makes their money on, on growth, right? And so so it's important, but that's where you need the programs from the banks, and you need the problems from the community credit unions, or even, small associations of interested people who live in the neighborhoods, right? I mean, you see this a lot now. During COVID, you saw a lot of people come to the rescue of some business, right? I mean, why they come to rescue the business? Because it was good for that. I think that's where you can get them. It's very important that these kind of companies exist.
Okay, another Zoom question. What is needed to create secure spaces for people who have government clearance?
I was coughing. You need probably a corporation that is a secure corporation, or a university that's willing to take it on to, quote, employ those people in subcontractor roles or contractor roles, so that you can, they have a place to hold their clearance. You need a place to hold the clearance, and then you need a location where the clearances are useful. And I think that, if we talk to the buddies over at AFRL or one of these organizations, this could be figured out and not only possibly even funded.
This is part of a broader question from my perspective. You've seen that the state has invested a lot in venture firms that invest in companies. What the state has not done, what really pretty much no one has done, is invest in infrastructure. So if you're trying to attract a company from out of state or expand the company in state, you would really love it if there was move-in ready space available. It's just not here. So whether it's secure space, or whether it's like the lab space that I have, or other specialty spaces, it's just not here. And the state has not created the kind of incentives for real estate developers that would focus on tech expansion of the technical world.
I would agree on that. We were just looking for space for one of our startups that needed some lab space, and surprisingly, not a lot of space, and basically found no availability unless we were willing to, go to a university and share in the IP, right?
And that's some of the development we're hoping will happen here at Innovate ABQ, but it is a challenge for sure, especially right now, I think, with commercial real estate. Okay, another question from Zoom. Alternative energy, clean energy was pointed out as a driver of innovation and investment in the US and internationally. How can New Mexico participate in this structural opportunity in a meaningful way while maintaining its oil and gas interests?
It's just investing in startups. It's pretty straightforward, actually. There are a lot of startups. There are a couple of funds that are around that focus on that space. I don't think it's a terribly difficult issue to address.
Yeah, as well as it's not an either or. It's not like if you invest in renewable energy, all of a sudden, the world is going to change dramatically for at least 20 years, right? So, I mean, I do think you will see a lot of investment even in ones that, in the nuclear space, you're already seeing some in that space.
So one of my companies is a company that does electric vehicle charging. It's doing it nationally. The largest investors in electrification for vehicles are Shell and BP, European oil companies. The American oil industry hasn't invested, but the Europeans are very aggressive.
Great, and I know at UNM, and I suspect at the other research institutions statewide, there's a lot of research that supports the oil and gas industry too. So I think we are all cognizant of our need to continue that investment activity. Okay, another question from Zoom. It is estimated that baby boomers own 60% of all small to medium-sized businesses. However, less than 30% have a transition business plan, and most plan on retiring in the next 5 years. What is the state doing to help businesses transition ownership?
I would put that to the floor.
Me too. No expertise here.
No expertise. First of the third generation. Nothing. Help fund company coach. Always wondered. Yeah, I'll recreate. Okay, the question is, how do you accomplish creating an environment that is for companies that want to scale? How do you go from 25 to 100 people? Well, you need to think, one, that that's a goal, okay? And if that's the goal, how would you incent? So that requires that you start having workforce training programs that are going to have a workforce that's available to go up to that level. Two, you want to think about the capital requirements that those companies are going to need to scale, and that it might not be venture backing, it might be loans and other tax incentives. Three, you want to think about the real estate. What infrastructure is going to be available to allow a factory or a company that needs 100 people who are using a lot of resource, not 20 people scattered around the state. So there are things for each aspect of creating this ecosystem that are addressable with similar programs that you do for early stage companies, that you then just think of it as for the next stage of a company. Hopefully that answers.
Yes, Bob. Word that came out of.
Why don't we take this? Yeah, we can. It's a good idea. Somebody get this mic. AV team.
No. president of our regions, is our AV team.
Good for something.
Stu, the word that I heard multiple times coming from your presentation was the word teach. As most of us in the room are from New Mexico, we're very familiar with the True New Mexico platform that's been going on for years. It's a wonderful, wonderful platform that you see in the airports that we rave about everything that states, countries would pay bazillions of dollars for that we have for free. And that is a wonderful asset that we have that nobody can ever take away from us. What we don't brag about as a state is what we've accomplished. It's a big secret. I now tell people we suffer from the Oppenheimer disease. Everything's a secret. Stu, Dr. Zadonis, multiple other educators and economic developers helped me and a partner of mine at Collier's develop a bragging piece of paper to promote this building over here as a life science center. And the problem is we don't brag about our goodness and our good things. We are a state of dichotomies. Espanola is the black tar heroin capital of the world. 20 minutes up the street, you've got the smartest people in the world. We need to figure this out and get it out to the public. And most importantly, I think, we need to teach our children that it's very, very cool to be smart. And we don't do a good job of that. So I would like to see how we as a state can start promoting brain power. It's good, not bang power, but brain power. Not cruising, not selling drugs, not being a criminal. That's not cool anymore. What's cool is being smart. Because if you're an idiot, you're going to end up in this 40%. Sorry, I got a little passionate.
I don't think there was a question there, but having a program equivalent to True New Mexico for the scientific base in the startup world here, I think could be hugely beneficial. But yeah, we need to promote ourselves.
So it's hard to follow up on someone like Bob's comments like that. So I'm not going to be as passionate, but I will bring up this aspect of workforce, which you guys have touched on in a couple of different ways. On the State Workforce Board, also working with New Space Nexus on Pathways to the Stars, which is getting to that aspect of putting the interest in space STEM K through 12 early career. So I ask, in terms of the effort from Roadrunner or Fat Pipe or some of the organizations, TJ, I think is as passionate about this as I am, but how do we, from the capital side, encourage the workforce development in some of these organizations? And I'll bring it up because the State Workforce Board right now is looking at the next 4-year plan for WIOA, the Workforce Incentive Opportunity Act. 4-year plan. It is out for public comment right now. And this is an ideal time for us to be able to put comments into that to support some of what you're saying about developing the workforce for scaling and putting that smarts back into the K-12 incentive pool. So question, how do you do that?
And this will be our last question. We'll have to move on to the next panel, but would you like to comment?
I'm confused about workforce development. And the reason I'm confused is that when I hear from our university systems, they are frustrated because so many of the students, especially in STEM, that they graduate, say they can't find jobs in New Mexico. And so they leave the state. And at the same time, I talk to companies who are trying to find STEM employees, and they say they can't find the employees. And I've also heard as we try to attract companies from out of state where they need to build a factory or something, they say they don't come here because they can't find tradespeople. They can't find the plumbers and the welders and the electricians who go other places, Texas, Colorado, because they make more money there. So, my sense without data is that our problem is not the chemists or the engineers, the biologists, or the other STEM graduates, but it's much more in the trades field. And there, it's a matter of not only training the people technically to do those jobs, but training them in the business aspects as well. And I kind of hinted at that when I talk, is people need to understand finance, even if they're an employee, basic understanding. And we don't, as far as I can tell, make any effort to help those people understand how to operate their own business, even if it's a one-person business. But those kind of people, I've always, when I had companies here, I struggled to find those tradespeople. And it's gotten worse over the last 5 or 10 years.
Well, thank you so much to our panel.